set. Hello, how are you? Nice to see you. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Finance Subcommittee. Before we begin, can I please have the clerk call the roll? Mr. Clerk?
Chairman Elliott?
Here.
Council Leary? Here. Council Milanazzo?
Here.
3 present.
Thank you. Let me thank the manager and your financial team, our acting interim auditor, as well as guest joining us, Council Belanger. So with that, this is the Finance Subcommittee. A number of items have been referred to this. Some motions that I've made and some other that my colleagues have made. A couple of first motions was we just wanted to get together, Mr. Manager, to get a report from you and the Chief Financial Officer and the other members of the staff on FY15, the status of FY15 closeout and any issues, as well as where we are, excuse me, financially with FY16. And I know we're entering, believe it or not, the budget process for FY17, but we thought it was important to get together, at least to get a discussion on those. And in the meantime, we get audit reports from the auditor's office. We'd like to talk about that a little bit as well. So, pardon me. With that, turn it over to you, Mr. Manager, and we'll proceed with
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Throughout my nearly 2 years as city manager, I have often talked about 3 pillars: education, economic development, and public safety. However, the foundation of the above priorities is strong financial management. Without responsible fiscal planning, strides in education, economic development, and public safety are not possible. The City of Lowell finances have become more secure than at any time in recent history. This is in large part due to the talented financial team I have assembled. I would now turn it over to them to discuss the issues before this subcommittee. Thank you for your support, and I'd ask the Chief Financial Officer, Connor Baldwin, to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and thank you, Mr. Baldwin. We appreciate the preparation and putting this together, as well as your work on the finances of the city. So with that, Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Mr. Manager. We've prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation to review some of the items that were referred to this committee. And we're going to start with a review of fiscal 2015. Fiscal 15 was, in essence, a year of financial challenges overcome. The most noteworthy of those was the net school spending requirement from the Department of Education. When the city manager took office, the city was faced with a $3.8 million deficit in the spring of 2014. And from there, we have come to a surplus of $1.2 million, which was recently certified by DESE. In addition to the net school spending challenge, the pension assessment has been another major obstacle. We had a nearly $3 million increase in the pension assessment for fiscal 15, which needed to be met, as well as, we've come far from it now, but as everyone remembers, a year of historic snowfall in fiscal 2015. The city earned the dubious title of being the snowiest city in the lower 48 states. And when all was tallied, it was about a $4.8 million cost to keep the roads safe during fiscal 15. However, the city manager took quick action to absorb the costs into the budget. Some of those include the implementation of a vacancy review committee during fiscal 15, as well as a critical review of all purchase orders over $2,500. That lasted as soon as we saw that the snowfall was going to be one for the record books, and it lasted throughout the fiscal year. And that allowed us to absorb $2 million of the excess expense into the budget using existing appropriations. So had those measures not been put in place, the deficit that needed to be rolled forward and amortized over 3 years could have been much larger.
Mr. Baldwin, can you just go back what the original deficit was, or did you have a firm number of what that was, and as a result of those savings? I'm sorry, I was...
Yes, so the amount that was submitted to the Department of Revenue was $4.8 million.
For snow and ice?
For snow and ice in
Okay.
fiscal 15.
Right. And was that the entire deficit that we were going to have
That's
to recapture?
not the deficit, that was the total expenditures.
Right.
So we budget about 1.35, and there was a FEMA reimbursement of approximately $452,000
Okay.
for the costs associated with the Juno storm.
Right?
So the amount that it was a $500,000 amortization over 3 years that was voted on by the council last fiscal year.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that clarification.
So other expenditure control measures aside from the Vacancy Review Committee and the critical review of purchase orders was an expanded use of the Lowell program in the city manager's office. Lowell was expanded to review on a monthly basis overtime in all departments, as well as revenues as they came in, and also in researching and implementing best practices in financial management from other communities, both in the state and nationally.
Mr. Baldwin, do you have an estimate? I guess this was my original question. Do we have an estimate from these measures that you put in place, what the savings were approximately?
I would say approximately that $2 million that was able to be absorbed from within the fiscal 15 budget
Right.
can be attributed directly to those three measures that we just spoke about.
Right.
So moving on, to review some of the fiscal 15 and fiscal 16 improved financial management aspects, Standard & Poor's, the ratings agency, upgraded the city's financial management analysis score from good to strong. That's a review of a city's financial policies, their review of expenditures and revenues, etc. We also received some positive remarks from the state during our time visiting the Municipal Finance Oversight Board from the Office of the State Auditor. We've been able to build reserves to their highest level ever. In fiscal 15, the City Council created the Capital Debt Service Stabilization Fund using free cash to the tune of $955,290, and also invested the $7.8 million that had been appropriated in the OPEB trust. So that is now earning interest and will go towards mitigating the future liability associated with OPEB.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Finance Director. The $7.8 million, according to the report that we did receive from the independent audit firm, the first year it was invested, it was not earning interest. Was there a reason for that?
Thank you. We have resolved that issue, and that the reason it became a comment on the management letter was because we were weighing the options of investing with a bank versus investing with the state retirement trust. We did our due diligence in carefully analyzing the returns on both systems, and we came to the decision to invest outside of the trust, and it is now earning interest. So that comment has been resolved.
Thank you.
That was your question? Okay. So did we do any investing into the Pension Reserves Investment Trust or not? Did we decide not to?
No, we did not.
Okay. But since that time, the fund has earned almost $170,000 in investment.
Thus
returns.
far in fiscal 16, that's correct, Councilor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So some other fiscal 15 and fiscal 16 financial accomplishments that we'd like to note. The city, for the first time in its history, received the Government Finance Officers Association National Budget Award for the fiscal 2016 budget, something we're very proud of. And we were able to refinance some old debt because of our better credit rating. So we achieved savings of $2.6 million by selling refunding bonds in the garage enterprise, and $450,000 in savings in the general fund. We were also able to achieve, and we've talked about this in the regular city council meetings a few times, savings in the pension by making a one-time pension at the beginning of the year as opposed to quarterly payments as we did in the past. So we were able to find some savings which allowed us to free up some room in the fiscal 16 budget. So in looking at the status of fiscal 16 to date, we're about 8 months into the fiscal year. Some of the accomplishments noteworthy in this year are due to the city manager's pillar of education. We have been projected by the Department of Education to exceed the net school spending number by $5.7 million in fiscal 16. We had a number of challenges to meet in fiscal 16, such as keeping the residential tax low, which is always a priority. As a matter of note, the city uses 37% of the tax levy in funding its annual budget. The median across the state in tax levy support for the budget is 66%. So the amount is low. We have a low rate as well. We've seen another dramatic increase in the pension assessment in fiscal 16, continuing to fund the schools, which you see as an accomplishment in the net school spending number, an additional $500,000 increase to our Greater Lowell Tech assessment. But despite all those challenges, there have been a number of highlights in fiscal 16, which include adding 6 new police officers, 9 firefighters in the fall of 15, with 12 more to come, thanks to a grant position that was created by the City Council, and a new senior inspector position funded to help with the NEED and the DART programs to help address problem properties throughout the city of Lowell. I'll turn it back over to the city manager.
Because of this city council's support of these fiscal policies, we've been able to make great strides in the city and really fund really important projects to help out the residents of the city. And it wouldn't have come really without the wisdom and the courage of the votes of this city council. For example, Tiger Grant funding number 1, I think, on our list is that we're going to be able to replace and/or repair 8 decrepit bridges across the city and improve transportation for our residents. We've added 6 new police officers to the police department. When it came time for us to fund the $2 million feasibility study for the new high school, we had the wherewithal to fund that feasibility study without any detrimental effect on the tax rate or on the residents. And the capital investments that this city council has made has been spectacular. As it shows in the school building improvements, $1.4 million for the Concord River Greenway, $4.14 million in paving and curbing that year, $3.5 million to replace the Lawrence Street Bridge, and the other fiscal planning capital investments that we've been able to achieve. Truly a commendation to the City Council for supporting these investments and making our city that much better today. And now I'd like to turn it over to Rodney Conley to just do a closeout analysis of fiscal year 15.
Just a quick question through you, Mr. Chair, to the city manager. The $2 million feasibility study, we're going to be getting like 79% back from the
Yes.
state as well.
Yes.
Good. No, that's good. Thank you very much.
Right.
Mr. Conley?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager. So this next slide details some of the different documentations we provide the DOR as part of the end-of-year closeout for 2015. They included, from the Treasurer and Auditor's Office, a cash reconciliation report, the statement of indebtedness, a list of outstanding receivables, the Treasurer's cash year-end report, the balance sheet checklist, and, of course, the Schedule A, all of which were completed at the end of calendar year 2015. In February, we obviously completed the independent audit, which we're reviewing today. And then the last item that's still an open item is free cash certification, which we're hoping to have wrapped up in the short future. Just by way of numbers, in FY15, the general fund brought in $319.1 million in revenue. The total expenditures were $318 million. For the enterprise funds, water brought in $11.1 million in revenue and spent $9.9 million. The wastewater sewer, $17.9 million in revenue, expended $20.2. In parking, $6.9 million in revenue and $5.9 million expended. Moving on to FY16, the chart you see there is sort of a high-level view of revenues year to date. The biggest intergovernmental revenue, obviously, is Chapter 70 at $135 million. It also includes our unrestricted general government aid. And the other large item here is taxes. That's cyclical based on date, so percentage-wise, we're on track. The big item that will be a seasonal amount of money brought in will be motor vehicle excise tax, which is going out this month. So that number will increase significantly as well. As you remember, the tax rate was approved on December 21st. The budget included an increase in taxes of a full % less than the state allowed 2.5% under Prop 2.5. But as the manager promised during the budget hearings, every effort was made to reduce that effort. We included $400,000 in excess new growth into the levy, as well as reducing the levy by $1.5 million in excess local receipts that we realized in FY16. So the result is a potential increase to the average tax bill was reduced by 36%. For excess levy capacity, the city still has $15.1 million in excess levy capacity. This is the difference between the current tax rate and the max allowed by Prop 2.5, which is also a measure of Lowell's affordability as a place to live. This next slide, you have a handout that provides some mid-year reports on detailed department expenditures, both salary and expenses. We just wanted to break out a couple that have changed since mid-year due to the nature of the season. The first one being sick leave buyback, which is offered in January other than rolling retirements. So as you remember, in FY15, that was a challenge due to the new policy of sick leave buyback, allowing a 10-day buyback. So in FY15, our original budget was $1 million. This was a new policy put in place. It was tough to pinpoint how many people would exercise the 10-day buyback. It ended up being at $1.7 million when you factored in 10-day buyback plus retirement buyback. So for the FY16 budget, the amount budgeted was raised to $1.5 million. It looks like we're right on pace to meet that, depending on retirements towards the end of the year. But we're through the bulk of the expenditures in that line item. And finally, snow and ice, knock on wood. It's been a lot different than last year. We've still expended a total of $864,000 thus far year to date, out of our budget of $1.35 million. In keeping with last year's expenditure controls, the manager has once again instituted the Vacancy Review Committee. That is in effect, as well as a strict review of purchase orders. And the newest item is a grant review committee that the manager established, and that's just to make sure that the finance team is on board as we go out and apply for grants that may have some matching component so that we can budget accordingly. And now I'll turn it over to Interim Auditor Bob Healy to talk about the independent audit.
Okay, so just before we proceed, I just want to make sure Council Belanger or Council Milonazo, members of the subcommittee, don't have any other questions on FY15, or you did give an explanation of FY16. So if that's okay with you, Mr. Manager. Council Milonazo?
Thank you, Mr.
Council
Chair.
Belanger? Council Leary's also.
If you could just touch upon the overtime and the police and fire. I'm looking at this for FY16 with the new hires. It looks like we've done a good job controlling the overtime in both the police and fire. If you just want to touch upon that, or have one of your members of your team.
Thank you, Councilor. The police overtime is in good straits, as we're actually running below our projections for overtime on the police. The fire department is another issue. Keeping open the amount of companies that we promised to keep open and are keeping open has taken a toll on our overtime account. So we are running over again in overtime, but that's expected because of it, and we will be making a full report to the council on this. Could you just address the overtime for Councilor Milonazo?
Yeah, so as the manager mentioned, it is tracking a little bit higher than what we budgeted. One of the other reasons is they've had a higher number of retirements this year. So the benefit of that is while overtime has gone up, we've built up some surplus in salaries that if need be, we can transfer over. And they also, as we mentioned, the 9 firefighters to backfill open positions, but the 12 new firefighters, those are additional. So that'll help reduce overtime as we go through the last quarter of the fiscal year as well.
Well, if I could, Mr. Chairman, one follow-up question, not related to overtime, but relating to the savings from Amoresco. Are we still seeing the savings that we saw in the initial years of the Amoresco contract in FY16? And I think it was mentioned in the audit report that there was some.
Thank you. We have been able, we were able to reduce our budgets for electricity. However, we're sort of plateaued in terms of the savings at this point, and with our net metering credits, which is not necessarily related to Amoresco, but another piece of some of the energy programs at the time, we are seeing, like I said, sort of a plateau in energy. One thing worthy of note in terms of the future is we locked in at an incredibly low rate back in 2009, where we were paying So our rate per kilowatt hour was excellent. That contract, because they only let you sign 3-year contracts at the maximum for energy, is due to increase by approximately 18% next year. So we're going to be seeing increased energy costs, and it has a lot to do with the excellent rate that we had at the time, less than some of the Amoresco improvements.
Thank you. That's an excellent question and a good point, because as we look forward into budget deliberations for 2017, it might be helpful to get some of that information on where we are at, where we plateaued, when is that contract up, and what that variance will be. Also, Council Belanger?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Connor Baldwin, FY16 year-to-date revenues. Can you elaborate a little more, Connor, on miscellaneous revenue, where you budgeted FY16 2.2 million, but year-to-date actual is nearly 4.2 million? Can you just give a little explanation there, please?
Sure, that's a very good observation, Counselor. Miscellaneous revenue, that category, while we try every year to reduce the number of accounts we categorize as miscellaneous by fitting them in a better slot that's more descriptive. That includes your various departments' receipts that are miscellaneous, treasurer, assessor, miscellaneous receipts. However, there is one notable item that's accounting for that spike that you see, and that the investment income is included under the miscellaneous receipts. So that's interest on investments, but it also includes any premium received from note or bond sales. Now, if the council will remember, back in the fall, we had a pretty sizable sale of a bond. It was about a $40 million bond that was sold to finance a number of capital projects in the general fund and the enterprise funds, and that generated a significant premium. So that is driving that number up this year. However, that's not a recurring revenue. While we do sell debt every year, seeing that kind of premium is unusual.
Okay, well, that's good news. I think with that kind of addition, we can light up another canal with that. All right. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council. I think with that answers a lot of the issues and questions. I think that's very good information. So if there's no other questions, we'll just, I had questions on snow and ice to date, use balance. I know we typically underfund that because we're allowed to, the state allows us to overspend, not knowing when or how to predict snowstorms, but that, I was taken aback a little bit that we spent that much, considering it's been a mild winter. Maybe we're just comparing it to the prior winter. But doesn't that include the purchase of snow and salt that we certainly may not have used all of it, or?
Are you talking about this year, Counselor?
This year, yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
So you do see some of that, which seems unusual. However, anytime there's ice on the roads or there's a cold night, to keep the roads safe, just as you mentioned, the cost of salt and sand,
Yep.
and also the cost of overtime for the guys to be out there with the trucks salting and sanding the roads is an applicable snow and ice charge. And as you mentioned, snow and ice is one of the very few accounts where the state allows us to deficit spend. However, there are a couple of requirements. One is that you budget at least the amount that you budgeted before, if not more. And just by way of an anecdote, I was down at the Municipal Finance Oversight Board last year and was talking with my colleague from Lawrence, and they budget only about $100,000 for snow and ice. So compared to other like communities, we do budget a decent amount. However, it is desirous of the finance team to try to increase that number moving forward for our budget.
Yeah, no, we used to do the same thing many, many years ago, and I think it's not the most responsible thing to do is to completely underfund it, but it's also, when you're looking to keep taxes low, and it's also an incentive at the end of the year. If you do overspend, then you can look for other areas and savings to address that deficit. So I appreciate it. I appreciate the explanation, but it's just for the people at home. It's been a mild winter, and we're not through it yet, and we have still spent $864,000, which it's a lot. I'm sorry, Council Belanger, you get something else? Nope, never mind. Okay, so with that, I know we'll just move forward. We did refer the audit? This
Thank
year's
you,
audit?
Mr. Chair, and just to add to that snow and ice news, you can add the invoices that have come in this week of $104,760 from the Friday, Monday storms of a little over a week ago. But going to the independent audit, I didn't do a PowerPoint of these three documents. I didn't think you would want that. You received them in your package for the communication from the city manager last week and a letter from the chief financial officer that we worked on together in terms of corrective actions that are being taken. I think the most important note is, first of all, there are no material weaknesses that have been found by the outside auditors. The good news is cash on hand is at $94 million. Revenues exceeded projections by $400,000. Expenditures were less than budget by $1.1 million in accordance with the steps that the city manager has taken to take in more revenue than we estimate and spend less than we estimate to the extent possible. In terms of the corrective action plan, remember now this document closed the year on June 30th of 2015. So we have had 8 months to implement many of the corrective actions, especially the OPEB trust. That has since been invested, is since earning income. A couple of things are going to happen in some of the comments, fixed assets being one. The Munis system that the city uses is about to go through a conversion and an upgrade to version 11.1. That will take place early in March. So some of these changes, fixed asset accounting, updating the general ledger in terms of getting rid of accounts that have been inactive for many, many years, are best achieved if they're done during the conversion or an upgrade. The outstanding checks, or the so-called tailings, that is being addressed. As you know, the city converted its banking investment to a local bank. The checks that are outstanding from the former bank have all been closed out, and the city is going through the procedure of the obligatory advertisement and notification of people who may be entitled to payments, so they can come forward and payments will be issued. But otherwise, they will be closed to tailings and can be appropriated as if they were free cash. Another major step, and I can never explain why, but at some point the checks from the city of Lowell did not have an expiration date.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, or the finance team, why did that happen? Why did after 90 days, why was that taken off the checks? Because
I have no
think that-
idea. It was before my second incarnation in Lowell, I guess. But it
So can
now
I just-
does. The new checks say expire within 90 days. So that's
through you, Mr. Manager. So the treasurer has changed that. Was it as a result? Was that a treasurer decision, or who arbitrarily made that decision because this finance team was not aware of it?
It happened prior to this administration and was an initiative by the prior treasurer. The logic behind it, I can't speak to because it was before we were in this office.
Okay.
However, that as Mr. Healy has indicated, we have put the language back on the checks
Right.
that will allow us to address this moving forward.
Okay. So, I mean, vendors, contractors, employees, they know you get a check, you get to cash it because it stays on our books. It's a liability, and we have to continue to hold money in abeyance. I have some questions a little bit further on personal property and real estate that is covered in this, but I just wanted to get, that was one of my questions. Well, that has been changed. Do you see it making a difference, or you're really not looking at tailings from FY16 yet?
I'm sorry.
Has that made a difference at this point?
Oh yes, it has. It's relatively recent. It's
Okay.
probably within the last 6 weeks that we were able to get the checks printed in that way. But it is much improved. And I think the other point that's well worth mentioning, because it does concern people, is the concept of reconciliation of cash.
Right.
It's not cash like dollar bills and
No.
quarters. It's the general ledger versus the checking account and what has been, and also on payroll withholding, payments to the IRS, payments to other agencies that have withholdings for employees' checks, also requires reconciliation. So what Mr. Baldwin has done is begin a monthly meeting with the Treasurer's Department and the Auditing Department to make sure that these items balance, because the auditor has the general ledger, the treasurer has the cash book. But all you have to do is do it every month, and if you're in balance, you're going to be in balance on June 30th. So
Yeah, it's a long-standing finding.
financial officer drags us all into a room on a monthly basis and makes sure we can reconcile. So I think we really made great strides in these 8 months in addressing those issues in the management letter. Hopefully, I won't be here to discuss them next year at this time. Not in this role, at least. I'd be happy to discuss the budget items, but not the auditing items. And I think you'll see a marked improvement in the management letter.
Okay, now that's good. The cash reconciliation, I was pleased to see the management response to this. It's been a long standing problem. We have addressed that through additional staff. It was always a staff issue, and it's good to see these monthly meetings. Again, to the people at home, there's no cash missing by any stretch. It's a matter of reconciling, making sure that what is coming in is being accounted for and posted to the general ledger. So that's good. Mr. Auditor, further on the...
I think that pretty much completes the report. It is a good audit. It's a clean audit, and all the numbers, which are quite convoluted and complicated, are good numbers. And I think everybody worries about the items in the management letter, as we take them very seriously, and we have a good corrective action plan, and I think we're on a good road.
Good. So, yeah, Councilor Larry.
Just quick one, good that Standard & Poor's is upgraded you. I think that's a tribute to your hard work. Good for being proactive, taking the initiative, making things happen in terms of addressing the issues in the management letter. From reviewing the audit report, I got complete confidence in what you're doing, and I think the presentation is very good as well. The one question I had, and I don't know if it's auditing or more investments, the banking that we're using right now, is this local or are we going outside? How are we looking at that? How do you determine it? Are you looking in the future to make adjustments? That type of area I'm kind of interested in.
Thank you,
Mr. Manager?
Mr. Chairman. When I first came here, the vast majority of the money of the city was in out of city banks. And the three things that you look for in choosing a bank when you're depositing money is security, interest rate, and liquidity. And we looked at the local banks for those three criteria, and quite honestly, they were above the three criteria in the outside banks. So what we did is we made a concerted effort to transfer the money to local banks. And the vast majority of our money is now in local banks. Some of it we had to wait until the contractual time was up. But I would say, what percentage is now back in city banks, would you say, Mr. Baldwin?
I couldn't tell you an exact percentage off the top of my head. However, the two major accounts in the city are vendor account and the payroll account, which we issue an RFP, a competitive bidding process for that, was won by a local bank. And we're very pleased that not only did they bid, but they came out on top. And there were several national banks that bid, and so a review team was put together to review proposals, and it was a local bank that came out on top.
So just two follow-ups. So for the payroll, for example, we have to put an RFP out. How often is that, a yearly, annual, or biannual?
3 years.
3 years.
So it's a
okay.
3-year contract.
So how often is your team looking at investments that we currently have? Is that an annual basis in terms of the money that we have invested, or is contractual?
The treasurer is always reviewing some of the smaller accounts, the CDs, et cetera, on a more regular basis for safety, liquidity, and yield.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's important to note that, the responsibilities are segregated, and it's a team working with the treasurer. She is actually delegated and responsible by state statute for making those investments. But it's important, I think, to get the money back into local banks, and that it is bid, and that we do have the best interest rate, the greatest yield for our investments, particularly in those vendor accounts. So with that, I wanted, Mr. Auditor, I just wanted to, I know one question came from Councilor Mercia at the prior council meeting relative to fixed assets, and that the GASB 45 and where we are with that process, knowing that it's been a few months since this audit came up. Councilor Mercia is here. So, can you give us an update? And this is the requirement that every asset in the city is accounted for, sidewalks,
Well, the newest.
pipes, you name it. We got which makes all the sense in the world, but sometimes it's
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The newest GASB gimmick, as I refer to them as, is GASB 67 and 68, which require for full accounting of your OPEB liability. So it will show on a balance sheet, not as a cash deficit, but as a deferred revenue sense that it does become a negative in the overall accounting calculation. It does not impact, for the purposes of the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, your free cash certification or any of those items. But we're in compliance with yes, sir.
I think the real question is remember the issue about the assets, that we have to keep a list of all of our assets?
The fixed
Everything,
assets?
Sidewalks, streets, vehicles.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I heard GASB and I jumped.
That kind of plays into it because it's just another mandate that we go through this accounting process similar to GASB. GASB is fixed assets, machines, photocopiers, pipes, trucks, you name it. Where are we with that, Mr.?
Well, that is one that will lend itself best to the conversion of the Munis system to the upgrade, but it does need multiple parties to be involved. It's not just the auditor, it's not just the MIS director. You need the city engineer, the commissioner of public works, the director of the water plant and the sewage treatment plant, the school department. These are all your major capital assets. We have a list. We do have a list of our assets. The management letter stated that what we don't have in place is the deletion. Now, items aren't disappearing. No city property can be disposed of without going through the purchasing agent, a declaration by the department head that the property is surplus and an appropriate disposal, whether they be vehicles to be auctioned or traded in. So it's not a question of materials leaving the city and not being accounted for. It's a question of documenting the disposition of those properties when they are disposed of.
Great. Councilor Mercia?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I say fixed assets, I'm not really referring to a sidewalk. I don't think someone's going to come along and rip it up and steal it. I'm talking about like that piece of equipment right there. Who's using it? Where is it? And if we get rid of it, is it deleted off the list?
Yeah.
For example, what is to stop someone, and I hope people aren't listening, to come up with a uniform and wheel that out and say they're repairing it when they're really stealing it? So, things like this we don't think of, but they happen. So I like to keep track of what we own. Where did it go? Is it still here? I say this because about a year ago, a department in the city, I'm not going to say which one, gave away equipment, file cabinets, other things. And I thought to myself, gee whiz, couldn't we have sold any of this? Couldn't we have retained something for it? So, not that I am upset that people got it. I mean, they gave it away, I'm sure, but this isn't a giveaway place. I mean, that's our tax-paying money that went out the door to someone. I mean, not that they couldn't use it or they're going to take care of it, but we could have probably had a day in the city where we put all this equipment in a room and advertise and had people come in and offer to buy it. I don't know, that's just my idea. Someone's junk, like the city's junk, is someone's treasure. I mean, I'm trying to not be cheap about it, but I want the biggest bang for my buck, and this isn't a giveaway.
But that's the process, through you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
no,
That's the process that's in place for disposition of city property. It has to be declared surplus, and it has to be bid by the purchasing agent. It can't just be sold to somebody's
Stuff
cousin
wasn't
or
sold, it
whatever.
was given
Connor,
away.
did you have a point you wish to make.
So just if I could, this is part of the accounting process, and it does include sidewalks and includes everything because it's a valuation process that's used by, believe it or not, companies, bonding companies. They look at total valuation of the city. So, but it does include, filing cabinets and things like that. And as Mr. Healy did indicate, there is a process. Maybe we need to remind departments that there is a process. Mr. Baldwin?
As Mr. Healy, I think Mr. Healy was alluding to, some of the larger assets like the streets and the pipes, et cetera, because they're some of the hardest to track
Right.
and where we're focusing our efforts. When it comes to things like electronics, such as these TVs that are here in the council chambers, we do have an excellent system in place for those. You notice at the bottom left hand of the screen, there's a little tag on each one of those. My IT director has every piece of technology-related hardware categorized and is accounted for at all times.
I'm not surprised in that department. I would assume that was happening because I know the people there.
Yes.
But there are other departments that are not so efficient, and that's where I draw the line. Every department should be as efficient as your MIS department.
Okay. I'll say Council
Thank
motion on the concern. Thank you, Mr. Healy. Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Anything further on the audit? I think we're all set. I did have one, and thank you for the report. I think it was Mr. Baldwin or Mr. Manager. It was Mr. Baldwin. Your name's on it, but it was Mr. But you do have a corrective action plan, and I read through it, and we discussed most, if not all of it: fixed assets, tailing, outstanding checks, income, investment income. I did have a question on number 2, old outstanding receivables. That's going to be covered by the overlay. After 6 years, anything that you can't collect on personal property, I know we can't foreclose on it. We can't. We've chased them. We've sent bill collectors after them, but it's a liability that we carry. Is there anything that we can do? I mean, if the assessors say that it's taxable property, particularly by businesses, correct? We're not talking about residential homeowners. It's by businesses, and then
That's right.
they just default on it. Is that not attached to their tax bill? Can it be leaned against the property?
What happens a lot of time, Counselor, unfortunately for the city, is they go out of business. And then chasing after them becomes an incredible
I see.
undertaking.
So it's businesses that have primarily gone out of business. I
That's
think
right. And
that's
we've
important.
engaged a private company to go after some of the oldest receivables for
Okay.
personal property with, unfortunately, not as much success as we had hoped. So we've come to the point where we have to write those off from our books. And the
Okay.
overlay is the proper mechanism for doing that accounting-wise.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Could I just
wanted
make one comment?
Yeah, please.
Generally, related to the audit, the city of Lowell is a $364 million a year business. And I think, Mr. Chair, as you alluded to in the regular city council meeting, this is sort of our accounting report card. While, the numbers look great, we think we're doing good, we can't always see everything every year. And this is our opportunity to zero in on those areas we need improvement. So you see the corrective action plan, we take this very seriously. And we will be addressing every single one of these issues to help resolve them in fiscal 16.
Okay, no, thank you. And I believe, I'm sorry, is there anything else from my members? I think we're about time.
Right. I just have, if I could, Mr. Chairman, a quick question. And first of all, I think you are doing just a tremendous job in dealing with the audit report and dealing with the corrective actions and even looking into the future, finishing up FY16. I know you've got improvements, if you will, in place that are already bearing fruit. My question has to do with the authorized yet unissued debt since June 30th of 2015. The number was over $100 million. I know we're not obviously paying any interest on that debt until we draw it down, but have we made any progress on some of those larger projects as it relates to the authorized but unissued debt?
Mr. Baldwin?
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The authorized unissued debt some of these go back to the late 90s that have been sitting on the books. And the way, I guess, for the public at home maybe to think about this is credit cards outstanding that you haven't reached the total balance. When you go out to take maybe a mortgage or something, the lending agency looks at that and says, well, why do you have that there if you're not going to use it? So we are reviewing all outstanding debt and hope to this spring, as we look towards our 5-year capital improvement plan, as part of that initiative, rescind a lot of those loan orders that have been sitting on our books since the 90s.
Okay.
So cleaning a lot of that stuff up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you. So if we could just touch on 2016, 2017 before we close out. I know local aid local aid figures are out. Mr. Manager, you had a little experience just down at the State House. Do you foresee a lot of change between, Governor's submission, House, Ways and Means, Senate Ways and Means? And I know it's early, but it certainly has an impact on what we're going to do here.
No, thank you. It's a great question. I actually had a meeting with the local delegation yesterday, and the local aid figures look pretty straight, and they're going to come in at that 4.3% that the governor promised. The only question really is Chapter 70. Is that still an issue? Is how much in Chapter 70 increase? Right now, it's estimated to be about $3 million. That's below what the percentage of the local aid is. So I think that's still going to be up in the air during the legislature debate of the budget. But I think we're going to be able to do a pretty good estimate right now on our upcoming budget based upon the figures that have been presented in the governor's budget.
Okay, and you touched on this a little bit. You talk about Chapter 70. You touched on this a little bit. Net school spending exceeded this year 5.7. I mean, it's certainly unprecedented, but it's a positive statement that we have made to the Lowell Public Schools. Moving forward, I know a contract was just implemented or approved. I don't know what the status of that. To me, that is creates a structural deficit by every stretch. Last year's contribution was, what was it last year? 18 million?
18.9 million.
How are we having discussions with the school department at this point? I know this is all new, but how that, essentially 6.5 million is going to be addressed, knowing that Chapter 70 is up in the year, and there's certainly not going to be new money to cover that. That's a concern, because there's only one way to address this when it comes to net school spending, and that's increased taxes or significant layoffs. So I think that's something that, if you can keep the council abreast on as we move forward, will be important.
Yes, their new finance officer just came on board this past week, and I know he met with the financial team, and we're beginning discussions about the upcoming budget. I, like you, have serious having been on the negotiation team and seeing the figures, I have very serious concerns about the upcoming budget year, but we'll be working closely with the school department to try and bridge any deficit that's there.
Okay.
Just two quick questions to follow up on that. One, I missed part what you said about the Chapter 70. The $3 million in the governor's proposal, do you think that's a good number to use as an estimate, or you think that's going to be reduced?
No,
or
I think it's
increased?
going to be increased.
Okay. So that would automatically would have an effect on our net school spending.
Yes.
The other thing on net school spending, I guess, and you may not have the answer now, but we should start to know that, is exactly how much is going into the charter school of that $5 million. I mean, how much is that exactly because of the new charter school that we're actually having being hit with? And you may not know it now, and it probably isn't important to know now, but as we get into budget deliberations, that's a significant factor in what our net school spending really is going to be. And it's important to articulate that's something, we have a great savings, so we've done a good job, but a good chunk of that is also the charter school too. But as we get into it, I think that's your commitment, and what we've had offline as well as publicly, you've had a good commitment for the schools. I'm very impressed with the operation. I mean, $365 million operation. You're very proactive with it. You guys work well as a team, and it's something that, just sitting here learning it coming from the school side, which is a large chunk of this, but it's really good to see how you put things together. And it's good how you take an issue and come forward with it, and good with the questions that the counselors have asked about the investment money, about different things that you've done, especially the investment in the banks. I think local is something we all want, but I also have to keep an eye on, is it advantageous financially for us going forward? When all things are equal or close to equal, local is the way to go. But I appreciate your efforts tonight. Thank you very much.
Anything else from Council Belanger?
Yes, one quick point, then a question, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the net school spending potential deficit, is that You know, Councilor Leary made a motion weeks ago on additional federal funding for newcomers to the city of Lowell, which costs nearly twice to educate than an average student. So looking for an update there. We definitely need relief on that ground. That's something we need to stay on and pursue for sure. But, Mr. Mayor, through you to the financial team, what are we projecting for pension assessments for FY17? Any idea on that?
So maybe you can just reiterate at the beginning of the meeting, there was a 10-day buyback, 10-day retirement, right? So, and we're pretty much in line with that. I think that's what Councilor Belanger's.
Well, we have actually received our assessment for next year from PERAC, and it's about a little bit over $4.3 million increase. So we continue to see those increases in the pension assessment.
And is it next year that it goes down? I mean, I know we had 2 years of a spike.
Well, last year we thought it was going to be this year. We'll be
Okay.
fully funded in 2036. It'll drop off significantly then. We'll see gradual decrease. That's a long way away, but
Right.
we'll see gradual decreases in our assessment after this year, pending something else not happening next year.
Okay, so maybe that's a discussion for another meeting, because I think that increase is significant, and where we make that up comes out of other line items, but maybe we can try to get an understanding of how that came about, and I know we'll have to get a report from PERAC, but Mr. Manager?
Yeah, and just before we close, I'd like to take credit for all of this, but I can't. This financial team that I have is just spectacular. They've done a great job. They've been faced with great adversity, not only the net school spending, but the snow and ice deficit last year, and the three of them have done a terrific job, and I couldn't be proud of them. And I think the residents of the city of Lowell should feel safe and happy that their finances are in good straits with this financial team.
Yeah, I know. I agree, and I want to congratulate your team as well. I think you continue to make sound decisions, and when necessary, we prioritize where our spending can be. We look at refinancing and trying to save money everywhere we can. At the same time, keeping taxes low. We understand we want to make sure Lowell continues to be affordable in comparison to the rest of the state. I think that's what we owe our citizens. That's what makes and separates Lowell from everywhere else. But I don't think we mentioned, you are putting a vacancy review committee, or you have put a vacancy review. So we're reviewing all the vacancies. We don't continue to just hire, even though there are vacancies. You have a grant administrative oversight, tracking our grants, so anything that's not funded during these times, and you don't know, we're not having to plug those holes. So I think these things, looking at overtime, you're going to come back to us a report. Those are the budget busters where any potential savings get kind of gobbled up. So I think that's important. Anything else? I know we're running up against the clock. Councilor Milanaz?
Thank you. I'd just like to move, Mr. Chairman, that we accept the closeout of FY 2015 and the status of FY 2016 as a report of progress, and secondly, to accept the interim auditor's report for the FY 2015 independent audit report, and accept both of those as reports of progress.
Motion by Council Milanaz, second by Council Leary, to adopt FY 15 report, recommendations from 16, and close out of interim, the independent audit from FY 15. Roll call.
Chairman Elliott?
Yes.
Council Leary?
Yes.
Council Milanaz?
Yes.
3 yeas.
3 yeas, motion carries. We'll bring that recommendation in. Before we close, let me thank you, Mr. Manager, and your team. Let me also, I'm sorry, Council Samaras is sitting behind us. I didn't see you, Council. Any thoughts, anything? Nope? Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't know that you joined us. But with that, we'll bring this recommendation in. Let me also take an opportunity to recognize 2 residents who are city manager for the day, right? As a result of the Salvation Army bid. Is that correct, Mr. Manager? We have Mary Burns and Nancy McGovern. So as a result, before we close this official meeting, as acting managers for the day, the committee would just like to pose to you, would you like to make a decision that you as the manager will bring in a budget that will have no tax increase this year?
Well, being a Republican, absolutely. We will do away with taxes in the tax collector's office.
But thank you for your support of Salvation Army. Mr. Manager, thank you for volunteering your time. Ms. McGovern, you want to second that motion? Sometimes, statement made. Mr. Manager, last comment?
You owe us for the pizza we had beforehand.
Thank you, everyone. Motion to adjourn by Councilor Milonazo, second by Councilor Leary. All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed, this subcommittee meeting stands adjourned.
What's that? I think so, yeah. Yeah. I think you